Square and Compass podcast live. No more Zoom, at least this time, which is always preferable. And I am, for the first time in not just my Masonic career, but in my entire life, visiting the absolutely beautiful state of Colorado, the city of Denver. It's been terrific, and I am here with a very distinguished guest, Most Worshipful Brother Michael Moore. Thank you so much for joining.
Oh, it's my honor, and I appreciate you allowing me to be a part of this.
I mean, I call you Most Worshipful, which is correct, and I guess you'll always be Most Worshipful, but this must be an exciting weekend for you, the annual communication, where you get to take a step back a little bit.
Yes. Colorado has about 6,500 brothers in the state, just over 100 lodges, and this is the time of year that we have our elections and installations for Grand Lodge officers and Book of Constitution changes and everything else. So you're here for an exciting time.
And I wanted to mention this to you before we started, and I forgot, so I'll mention it to you now. One thing that's really amazing about Denver is as soon as you, at least when you're flying into the city, you're immediately greeted by a Masonic cornerstone and dedication at the airport. Do you know anything about that, how it came about? Because that is really, is a really cool thing to see as a Mason. The first things you see upon entering the city is a Masonic monument.
Yes, that is really neat. The conspiracy theorists just love it to death, along with the underground tunnels and stuff.
Okay, so that's a real thing. Because somebody, or not a real thing, but that's it. Because somebody commented when I put it up on Facebook, they said, "Is that the entrance to the secret tunnel?" And I didn't know what the reference was.
Yeah. See, just like with a lot of major big projects, there's always underground tunnels that service tunnels and wiring tunnels and everything else. And they always link those two together. But the cornerstone is really unique. It's a sci-fi looking cornerstone that's really retro and really neat to see. And I wasn't around when it was done, but it's one of the most popular cornerstones that we have in the state.
And is that a actual cornerstone, like cornerstone ceremony? That is a really, really cool thing. Was it done? So is the Denver airport, was that done is it like a new airport? Was it done when it was constructed, or was it done when they added the parts to it?
I think when they originally constructed it, Cameron, they put it in there, and it is a movable cornerstone. If you or your viewers ever see it, it's like a block with a Star Trek looking kind of back to it, and it has been moved a couple times. So if the viewers ever come to look at it, sometimes they'll have to ask where it's at, because it does get shuffled around during construction.
And one thing, and I saw it and I felt like such an idiot, it's one of those things that seems so obvious when you see it, but you don't think of it beforehand. I've taken part in cornerstone ceremonies. I talked about one of my podcasts, I'll leave a link, but the cornerstone at the airport, it actually has a separate plaque at chest level with Braille on it.
Yes.
And I never thought of that before seeing it. It seems like such an obvious idea, but such a good idea. Do most cornerstones in Colorado or Denver include a Braille portion?
No, that's a unique one. This year, during my year, we did 12 cornerstones, including a rededication of a 100-year-old one, but they're all incised. So I guess a blind person could read the numbers and letters because they're cut into the stone, but that's the only one I know of that has the Braille on it.
That is a genius idea. I took a picture and I sent a text to my friend who helped me with the cornerstone ceremony that we did for City Hall, and I was like, why didn't we think of this? So next time we're adding that, because that was a genius idea.
That's one of those things that, like you say, we just don't think about it. And whenever stuff like that's incorporated, it just makes us look so much better,
Oh, absolutely. So another interesting thing I just learned a couple seconds ago is that Colorado has a connection to, Colorado Freemasonry has a connection to the moon with your challenge coin.
Yes, and Cameron, one of my lodges in the state here, L.N. Greenleaf, had Buzz Aldrin did their second degree there. I think he was transferring from different places and stuff, and their coin, which I'm sure you'll show a picture of sometime, has a spaceman on it and stuff. and that's kind of neat. Texas has the flag and jurisdiction on the moon, but we have this little part here, so that's kind of neat.
That's a very neat thing. You mentioned 12 cornerstone ceremonies. That I can't. That sounds like a lot, which is a credit to the craft in Colorado. What do you attribute that to, or is that standard in Colorado? Because I don't know a lot of jurisdictions that have managed 12 cornerstone ceremonies. Part of it is due to COVID, but that seems like a very impressive number. Is there a new interest in the craft, or are groups reaching out to Freemasons to do cornerstone ceremonies? Where do you think that interest is coming from?
It's a combination of things. I probably like where you live at and all the rest of the jurisdictions. This year, things have opened up just a little bit, so people are interested in getting things done. We have probably 2 or 3 lined up for next year already, but 12 is a lot for us. We normally have 3 to 5 maybe, and so my officers and I have been really busy, but it's been a lot of fun.
And I gotta ask, what's it like being a Grand Master, or even a higher ranking officer in a state like Colorado that's so it's so big. It's so big. I mean, especially compared to some of the smaller states on the East Coast. It does remind me a little bit of Ontario in the sense that Ontario is giant as well. So the Grand Master, his year spends a lot of time on the road, a lot of time at back roads. But just what was the travel like were those 12 cornerstones all throughout the state? Were they in centralized locations? What's the travel like?
This year, I charged an expense for about 9,700 miles of travel in the state. And my wife likes to say we didn't touch any of the borders. It was all inside here, And the cornerstones were spread across the state. We had 2 or 3 in the Northeast. We had 2 or 3 in the Southwest. Our rededication for 100-year one was downtown, just south of Denver here. So they were spread out pretty well all over. Colorado is an exciting place for Masonry, and we've always thought we've been pretty progressive on a lot of stuff. Last year we celebrated our 25th anniversary for a compact between us and Prince Hall. So we were one of the first in the United States to recognize Prince Hall, and we'll have a large number of their officers here tomorrow for our ceremony.
So, as a most worshipful, a Grand Master, it can be even for myself, and I'm nowhere near your level. I've been a Mason for 13 years, worship master for 2 different lodges. I always try to think back to 2007 when I first joined, and the type of advice and knowledge that I could have passed on now that I could pass on then. So especially though as a Grand Master, most worshipful, what type of advice would you have for Masons coming into the craft, whether it be in Colorado or anywhere? Because there are differences in each state, and that's what makes it so much fun to travel, but there is a universality there, and usually advice is pretty transferable.
Yes. I spent a lot of time this year, Cameron, actually teaching my lower officers about a lot of situations and Masonic history within the state, so they'd be prepared for stuff like this here. Because every year is always different, and for a person coming in or just starting, Masonry is really what you make it. It's so diverse and so wide and broad. We think of ourselves as a pretty diverse state. We have different cultures and different regions, and we have plains and mountains and the Southwest, and we have everything imaginable here. And it all comes together this weekend, and you're going to see a lot of different individuals here. And for advice, I would just say, Freemasonry is one of these things that's just timeless and eternal, the truths that are taught to us in here. And you're not going to find that in a lot of different places. And I would just say, take whatever you find that is interest in you and go with it. Is it Masonic history? Do you like ceremony and ritual? Do you like self-improvement? Do you like civil and charity stuff? We have it all, and and whatever a brother finds that he's interested in, that's what he needs to learn and do about. And then realize too that as he goes through his Masonic journey, that will change. You know, I used to love Masonic history. I have articles and books and everything out on that. I have, and then I switched to learning about esoteric stuff and how that broadened me and made me better. And being in the Grand Line now, Cameron, it's all that's out the window, and it's management, moderation, you know, being a moderator, and looking for the future for the craft and stuff. And that's going to change for everybody. You know, we are one of the few groups that has the longest longevity awards around. This year in Colorado, my officers and I gave away almost 6,000 years of total longevity awards. In fact, first time in our history, we had 2 80-year awards that we gave out. And it was wonderful to hear those brothers talk. One was a 104-year-old brother from the Western Slope here that knew his grandparents. They were both doctors. Well, they fought in the Civil War. And he knew them and spent time with them. One for the North and one for the South. And they moved west so they could live together, you know. And it's stories like this here that show how Masonry is timeless and is a universal in theme in a lot of things.
That is a fascinating story. That reminds me, I was at the Grand Lodge of Missouri in Columbia. I was going to say this year, but last year technically. And the Grand Master held up a 100-year service pin, and he said, with the lifespans increasing overall, he said it's not impossible that somebody could join the craft today.
Wow.
That could theoretically live to be 100 and, if I recall correctly, 18 was the age limit.
Yeah.
Be 118 and receive this 100 years from now.
Wow, wouldn't that be something?
Do you think that that's one of the problems of modern society that perhaps Freemasonry can push back against? Because it wasn't uncommon. I mean, using Masonry as an example, if you look at stonemasons, I mean, it wasn't uncommon for a cathedral or pyramids, if you want to go back, you know, they would be started with the understanding that nobody alive the day it was started would be around to see it finished. You know, a 100, 200-year project wasn't considered crazy. Now, if it's not done in 5 minutes, you know, it's considered kind of, it's too slow. Do you think that is that an area where Freemasonry kind of has some of those lessons to offer society at large about the value of, you know, looking at the long game and not rushing to get things done?
I agree, Cameron. You know, everything is, you know, instant gratification today are very short. And, you know, most studies right now show us that for community, civil, and fraternal organizations, most of their members stick around about 13 years. And so anytime a lodge gives a 25 or a 50-year award, you know, that just blows those away. And for us, yes, we're just part of something that's much bigger than us. In fact, in my address tomorrow, I'm going to speak about that we have, you know, the ownership of the fraternity within our jurisdiction for such a short time. And we have to not only do the best we can, but prepare it for people that come after us so they can be successful, you know.
You talked earlier, you know, talking about advice to a newer Mason about finding what interests them, and pursuing it. Do you think that that's an area, or how much of that is up to the individual Mason? And how much of that do you think is up to the lodge to cultivate and recognize, you know, because every Mason that they're bringing in will have unique talents and abilities, and the importance of a lodge recognizing, okay, this candidate, you know, how can we utilize this candidate or this new Mason's talents and abilities so that he will enjoy his time in the lodge, and he will contribute, versus sit in the side and don't talk and just watch what we do type of thing. How much of that falls on a lodge versus a candidate, or versus a new Mason?
I think a lot of it really starts with the lodge, Cameron. They have to have a set of meetings where the newly made Mason is exposed to a lot of stuff, because he may not know what he wants, or know that it's out there. And if he can say, oh yeah, that piques my interest, something in the lodge there, then I think that's the starting point for it all. Because just probably like you and me both, when we first came in, we didn't know what to expect, and we didn't know what we could do or not do. And if a lodge has a quality lodge experience and educational times, then that makes it much easier for being diverse and being able to do stuff like that.
In terms of that study that you mentioned, 13 years active, do you know if the study defined the word active? Did that mean like regular attendance at events, or paying of dues, or what was? Because obviously, one issue, there's new Mason retention, in do they keep paying their dues, and then there's retention in the sense of, are they continuing to be involved in meetings? Obviously, when you get to the 50-year mark, old age, there can be a lot of issues that, health-wise, people move. But what have you noticed in terms of the retention of candidates, either in terms of, are they still paying dues, and versus how active are they remaining in lodge after they first joined?
Okay, that's some broad questions. Let me say that on the study, they really didn't quantify what they judged this by. I think it was just membership paying dues, because they didn't go into a lot of details on that. And as far as with us, anytime a brother reaches a 50-year mark, you're going to see a decline in attendance. That's just natural. Even with us living longer and having a better quality of life, and even brothers stepping up and taking them to lodge and everything else, they have done everything pretty much they're going to do, and they're there to educate and guide and to help, and stuff. And for us, there's always a big argument: is a Mason not a Mason when he demits or quits paying his dues, or does he always be a Mason? And I've always taken the stance that we give a Masonic funeral to anybody who's been a Mason, whether he's a card-carrying member now or not, because we can understand when they get older that they don't have the extra money or the time or anything else. But if they request it, then we will honor that.
In terms of the retention question or initiatives, one idea that I implemented in my lodge when I was the worshipful master, and I'm hoping to bring it back because it kind of fell out for any number of reasons, but I would ask an entered apprentice, so when he became an entered apprentice, when he was initiated, at the end of his initiation, I would ask him to write a letter to himself and place it in an envelope that would remain with the lodge until he received his 25-year pin, at which time it would be returned to him. So I was master for the first time in 2015. So our first first letter is sealed and won't be opened until September of 2049. But it's there in the lodge, and I think that has assisted with retention somewhat. It's a reminder. I don't even know if they remember what they wrote. They'll find out in 25 years. But and ideas like that. Have you come across anything that lodges have done in the state of Colorado to encourage retention of membership?
Cameron, nothing like that. That's a really unique idea, and I think that's something that other lodges should adopt. I've not heard that before, and that was a good idea on that. To help with retention right now, the lodges in Colorado are doing a few different things. Part of it is because we've just come out of the 18-month of COVID restrictions, and this is our first 2/3 of a year that we're really open and effective and doing business right now. And this year they're getting caught up on members that got caught in between degrees, and wrapping those up because of the restrictions and maintenance and improvement of the lodges, and then also bringing in all this list of people that have said that they've been interested now. They can start coming back and contacting them and stuff. And for retention, boy, that's a tough subject. We find that we lose about half of our EAs before they get to a fellow craft, and part of that is it's masonry turns out to be not what they expected it to be. Particularly, we love the National Treasure and all the stuff like that, which got us a lot of attention, but most of the lodges aren't that exciting, and that's a shame on that,
That's interesting. And the Grand Lodge of Ontario, to its credit, not that I always get along with them, but there's always disagreements. But I think to their credit, one thing they really started pushing, especially before the pandemic, was encouraging lodges as a whole to develop a relationship with the candidate before he actually becomes before his degree. Not the old way of you have a petition and you just get anybody to sign it, and then you get anybody to be the committee. Actually spending time.
I'm on a podcast.
Come on, say hello.
Hi.
What's your name?
Mike McMillan.
Cameron. Pleasure to meet you,
Master,
sir.
Colorado.
We're on Square and Compass podcast here.
Oh,
Mr.
you
Fred,
are.
Mike.
All right. Well,
We're
good.
just recording. We're not live. Don't worry.
Yeah. No, that's that. Tomorrow, give you grief. I'll head off and get registered, so I'm all done.
Cool.
I can go out, shower, shave, do all that kind of stuff that I didn't bother doing this morning. Anyway,
Too much information, Mike.
You're welcome.
Keeping that in.
Go ahead.
It's part of it now. It's part of it now, Mike.
Oh, and that's neat, Cameron. People have a different idea on what a Grand Master is like. And my wife's family comes from a very, very strong Texan Masonic family. And my father-in-law, who was a big blocky Marine that filled up a doorway, who was one of the first persons I talked to about Masonry, he only called one person Mister, and it was a past Grand Master from Texas that he knew. And when I was asked to be in the line, Cameron, 9 years ago or something like that, I didn't tell my wife because I was thinking about this here. And 2 weeks later, she's at the table and she says, "Okay, Mike, what's going on?" And I had to tell her that, hey, I've been asked to get in the line. And she set down her fork and she says, "Now, how am I going to reconcile this?" She says, "My family has this high, aspirations for what a Grand Master is, and I got to live with one. And I know this person,
Well, I'm sure the mystique wore off pretty quick.
and I said, "Well, honey, I think I'm going to have to work on that too,
When I remember when I was relatively new, 4th or 5th year, and I think one of the older guys told me, when somebody's the most worshipful, they're always the most worshipful. If you see them in the grocery store, you call them most worshipful. So I've always taken that to heart. But I know, there are some, well, even Masons, right? Even at the lodge level, there are some who really stand on ceremonial title as not because they necessarily want the respect for themselves, but they view it as respect for the office. Whereas others are more congenial, and that's the other thing. I mean, we talked about it with just like every state is different, but there's universality in purpose, right? Every Grand Master, every worship master is different, but there's universality in purpose, and if they are dedicated to the craft, whether they are the more rigid and formal or more informal, you can tell that they're doing it for the good of Freemasonry.
That's right. It's just not. It's interesting to see how different people.
Oh, need this? Sorry about that.
Oh, no, if you're using it, I'm so sorry.
No, you can take it.
No.
Look, can we finish for a
He's
little?
the impertinent one.
We're going to finish it for a while.
We'll be done in just 1 second. I should have checked before. I stole, for everybody listening to this, I stole somebody's cable armor floor channel box.
That is right, and the brothers in my state here know me on a lot of different levels and expect a lot of different things from me. You know, they expect me to be firm and strong when I need to be, and I have been, you know. But they're also, they like to have that familiarity. And most of these guys here will smile when they call me Grandmaster, you know, because they would prefer to call me Mike, you know, and they know me as Mike, you know, and but they respect the office, and that's the way they like being that, you know.
And I think that goes to, you know, the one piece of advice I have for a new Mason has always been, you know, you need to travel as much as you can, whether it doesn't have to be, you know, from Windsor to Colorado. It can be, you know, because there are 7 lodges that meet at the Windsor Masonic Temple. So if your lodge meets on a Thursday, come to the meeting on Thursday, but then go to the meeting on Friday.
Yeah.
Because every lodge, you'll see different things, and you'll pick up different things, and you'll incorporate it into your own ritual, your own Masonic work, and your Masonic career is just so much fuller for seeing a wide variety of perspectives and ways that it's approached. If it's always the same lodge, that can be very limiting to your career. Which brings me to my next question. To your knowledge, you got one from Canada, but will any are you expecting a lot of visiting brethren from out of state, other jurisdictions?
Normally we have about 20 here from around the states around here, usually part of our Rocky Mountain Masonic Conference group, you know, and they come and visit. This year we'll probably have 2. We'll see a number of Prince Hall from in the state here. We'll see some from Wyoming and New Mexico maybe, but a lot of people are keeping down their travel yet.
It's we're still just getting over COVID, right? And this is something I just learned about. I can't wait to read this. A View from the West, which was authored by yourself. Now, it mentions on the back here, Western Writers of America. First of all, where can people, and your other works, is this available on Amazon? Like, where can people find it? And what are the Western Writers of America?
I have 7 books out to my credit, and probably about 200 articles published nationally. I've been a staff writer for History Magazine for about 13 years. And before I got into the line, this is what I did a lot, was Western history stuff. I still critique scholarly articles on the American West. My books have been out of print now for a while. You can still talk to Sherlock Publishing in Texas for my latest one that they have. But it's been 9 years. Cameron, when I got in the line here, they told me I could not profit off of my notoriety as an officer, and told me I just couldn't do that stuff, you know. And so I had to stop.
Really? That's interesting. That is a whole other. I feel like that's a 3-hour conversation in and of itself, because I'm not sure about that. I understand. I mean, I've heard the same thing, but I've always wondered. I mean, you know, if a Mason, for example, I don't know if any Masons were involved, say, in the production of National Treasure, or you know, talk to Dan Brown, or any, or, you know, consultant on Angels and Demons, or
Right.
what's it, Lost Symbol, right? I don't know, but I've heard the same thing. I've always thought, though, if, you know, like any, because if Freemasonry is a skill, which I think it is, right, then, you know, musicians profit off their skills.
Yeah. You know, it's a fine line. We want to be able to have people be who they are, you know, and use their skills, as we talked about earlier, you know. And I've done a lot of stuff for writing in the state. There's a video out on Vimeo called Freemasonry in American West that myself and an award-winning producer in the state here, who's a Mason, who used to do Reading Rainbow and all that stuff. It was a promo for a pitched in Hollywood for a series, The Unknown History of the American West. And it talked all about Masonry, and your viewers can see that, you know. But even with that, you know, I had to be real careful, because in the past there was evidently problems in our Grand Line of people selling stuff and making a profit, you know, that they thought was not right as a Masonic Grand Lodge officer. But we need to be able to really have people do what they're good at.
It's a tricky line. For sure. But I very much look forward to reading A View from the West, and, you know, the next 2 days learning more about Freemasonry in the West. I can tell you, I've only been here a short time, but everything I've heard about Western hospitality has turned out to be true. Every Mason I've met thus far has been super friendly. Everybody I've met has turned out to be super friendly. So it's been a terrific time, and I want to thank yourself and all the brothers I've met and talked to at the Grand Lodge for being so welcoming and inviting. You know, us Canadians, they tend to want to get rid of us more than keep us around. But everybody's been super friendly, and it's been a terrific couple of days so far, and tomorrow's where the real work starts.
Yeah. Tonight will be our Vesper service and our Grand Master banquet, but tomorrow we have the opening of the Grand Lodge and all the original business and the introductions and stuff, and then we'll finish up Saturday around noon if everything goes right. And Cameron, we're always happy to have visitors. I totally agree. I think visiting lodges and states and stuff not only makes us a better person, but gives us a much broader idea of what Masonry is. Lodges can be very myopic because their whole world surrounds doing things right and getting this good and doing this here. And then when you get to the Grand Lodge level, you suddenly realize these are like little planets all circling, the sun, and they all have to be in order, or otherwise it's chaos.
Absolutely, and I don't envy any Grand Master or anybody in a leadership role, especially the last couple of years, whether it be my home jurisdiction, right? We in Ontario, for better or worse, right? It all depends on your point of view, I guess. But we've always had, I think, perhaps stricter restrictions in the States, and obviously as Freemasons, in the province, we want to make sure we're respecting the laws of the. So it's just I don't envy whether it be our Grand Master David Cameron or yourself or any Grand Master. It can't have been easy the last 2 years trying to balance public safety with Freemasonry, with local guidelines and regulations. So I think it's a credit to all the Masons and Grand Masters who served, the work that was done to keep the craft going over the last couple of years.
Thank you, Cameron, very much. And it's been nice meeting you.
You as well.